Okay. Good morning. Welcome to a webinar put on by SCORE. I hope you all have been able to click on, that there are not too many problems. I hope this is where all you want to be. Understanding price, costs, and margins for your small business is the title. And as you can see, we suggest that this comes first before you can plan your business. We say that because your business plan will be based on information that comes from understanding pricing, costs, and margins. You cannot do a business plan before you understand pricing, cost, and margins. The presenters are Nina Matikow and me, Arnie Sternheim. I will be primarily your host. I just want to say a few words about Nina for a second. As opposed to most presenters in this thing, Nina has actually done what she is talking about, and she is going to reveal to you what she's learned from her experience. She is not selling a service to you, and therefore this should be relatively special for you because you will actually hear from someone who has done it, not someone who charges to do it. So I think that you really need to pay close attention and learn from someone else's experience. SCORE Westchester. The best thing about what we offer, I think, is that it's free. And very often people come to us with problems which we're very happy to work with. But particularly for small businesses, I think what we offer is special because it's often expertise that a small business needs but cannot afford to hire. And that's really the gift here if you take it, that you could get the insights of someone who you would love to hire, and it is free. Please call us, reach out to us with questions. If you'd like to set up working with a mentor, we can do that for you. And if you simply want to follow up with some of the things we spoke about today, please do so. We'd be very happy. Nina is going to talk about how she managed a large business selling to large retailers. And some of you may say, well, I'm never going to do that. And that's maybe true. But seeing how it's done by a professional on a professional level will reveal very, very important concepts, very, very important practices that you can employ even on a small scale. Okay. We've often found that when people come to us, they tend not to include all the costs that they are incurring. Very often they underestimate. And as important, they don't realize that these costs can vary. And so very often people come to us because either their costs have increased or the price they charge has been forced to decrease because they've been undersold. What this is about really, okay, is to come up with a business plan and an understanding of pricing, costs, and margins that will enable you to deal with your costs going up, maybe even go down, or changes in the marketplace, meaning what you charge you can no longer charge. This is largely strategic rather than attempting to deal with a problem that you can't solve. So we're going to talk about calculating all costs, calculating the cost of selling on a channel like Amazon or even a local retailer. Very important, having more than one supplier, that is to know how to deal with the disruption in your supply chain, and how to make decisions about what you want to pay for. Reliability is worth paying for. You will have the opportunity to submit questions. And as we go, please feel free to do so. We will answer as many as we can, but we think it's best if we save them to the end. Okay, so if you can just bear with us, please write in your questions and answer the questions regarding our polling as soon as you can. But we will get to questions toward the end. Okay, if you've answered the polling questions, thank you very much. And I think we're ready to rock and roll. Understanding pricing, costs, and margins. We believe these are essential components needed to create a business plan and to maintain a successful business. I'd like to focus on the first bullet. People who come to us love to talk about how their product or their service, but rarely do they talk about their costs, their suppliers, and the problems that they incur tend to involve costs and supply, which is why what you learned today is strategic. We will talk about the costs that service businesses have and product businesses have. And the last bullet's kind of interesting. It says setting a profitable selling price must be your objective. Well, some of you are probably going, well, no kidding. But that is actually a more complex process, a more challenging process based on mastering your costs. That's what we're going to talk about. Nina is now going to tell you about a real experience she had. Please pay close attention. Nina?
Good morning. Let me share a real life experience with you. As my company was growing, we were beginning to sell the big box stores. Target was really high on my list. Target had a great audio department, which was what the business that I did, and we had worked very hard to get a test in Target. I anticipated the orders would slowly increase, and lo and behold, with terrific news, they sold out on the test. But the new order we received was much larger than anticipated. And upon checking our inventory, we didn't have enough goods to fill the order, and there was a delivery date we had to meet. We called our key suppliers, and the dates they could deliver would never enable us to meet the Target shipping deadline. Now, over the years, I have learned that this kind of situation did happen. So I had vetted and had on hand other suppliers. Quick calls were made to them, and we were able to get the goods needed to complete the shipment. I had to pay for some extra FedEx bills to get everything in line, but fortunately my margins allowed for it. The point is that this is a perfect illustration of why you must think ahead to potential problems and be prepared for them. I think back to this example, and I know I would have not been able to have Target as a customer had I not filled that order.
I think that one of the key takeaways, no one would argue with someone who told you to be prepared. But by preparation, we mean something very, very specific, meaning that you know what you can afford to do via your margins and your costs should a problem arise. And again, you have to think of your costs as variables. They can change. Maybe if you become more efficient, they can even become less. But as I said earlier, many people come to us with an unanticipated problem, a change. Either costs have risen or the price they can charge has fallen. What we're talking about today, of course, can be applied to a problem, but is really meant to help you create and maintain a stable business, a sustainable business that can deal with change, which happens.
What's included in cost? Everything. All components, assembly, warehousing, percentage for overhead, shipping costs, all the things that are listed here. If you have a website, just putting up the website is not your sole cost. You have web maintenance, Google Analytics, links to your site. You've got to be realistic in the cost of your product. The initial thoughts on costs are usually not inclusive of all costs, but the overall objective in all of this is for your business to be profitable. You must be realistic in the cost of your product. And if you are not, rethink your product. When you enumerate costs, think overhead, all components necessary for the product, manufacturing, assembling, warehousing. It can't be in your garage forever. Shipping, sales commission. And then are you selling on someone else's site, like Amazon or Etsy? Those are not freebies. There were real costs in doing so, and make sure you know them. Are you putting up a website? Who's maintaining it? Who's providing the analytics? The bottom line is be realistic in your cost of products.
No one would suggest not being realistic. And so I think we need to take a few seconds. What do you mean by realistic? Who doesn't want to be realistic? So exactly what do you mean by realistic? I'll answer that one. Realistic means that you have some sense of change, that you know some history of your business, you know some history of the costs of your supplies, et cetera, et cetera. Let me talk a little bit about a service business, because Nina spoke mainly about a product. Very often when people come in with an idea for a service business, particularly one in which, say, they charge by the hour or by the project, they tend not to think of costs in terms of prep, which they may not get paid for, travel time in which they may not get paid for, marketing, which they may not get paid for. So in a service business, it's very important to think about all the time and effort that is put in for which you do not get paid. That is in effect a cost. It's not a direct cost, it doesn't come out of your pocket so much, but it does take away from whatever you charge per hour or per service. Very important.
This is a sheet that is really important to have tacked up on your bulletin board, because it's so easy to just miss some of what's included here.
None of this is meant to be daunting or meant to scare in any way. What we're really trying to do is help people with an idea this is how an idea starts to become a business. These are not impossible obstacles to overcome, but they are things you need to know. They're, in most cases, quite doable, and they actually give you different strategies to employ, choices you have to make. But this is the standard you have to meet.
Now, how do you determine your selling price? This is not a small question. You are going to have different costs depending on who you are selling, what you're asked to contribute, the size of the order, etc. Having completed the competitive analysis, you'll have an idea of what your pricing needs to be. But if you can't meet the margin requirements, either rethink your product or pass on that retailer. So how do you determine your selling price realistically? I'm assuming, or rather hoping, that you have done a thorough competitive analysis and you know what the selling price is for your competitors. Unless you have something so unique, so different from competitors, the market is telling you the correct pricing. For example, when I was selling CDs, single CDs ranged in retail pricing from $5 to $15. And there were budget CDs that were sometimes $3. I priced my products right in the middle, relying on my product presentation and content. I wasn't the cheapest, I wasn't the most expensive, but it worked. So knowing the price range and knowing what's really included in your course is a key step. Remember also that different channels of distribution have different costs, and you may need to select those channels that have costs you can handle. If you can't meet the pricing and have the margins you need to rethink your product.
Which is probably a good thing. That's what successful people do. They rethink when and if necessary. And the good part about this is you get to do your rethinking before too much money is spent, too much money is borrowed, too many fixed costs are already built into what you need to do. One more thing. Nina mentioned that the competitive analysis will give you a good idea where your pricing needs to be. If you recall from competitive analysis, chances are your product is specific enough where you really need to know exactly where the pricing is on exactly what you have. Unless what you're producing is a commodity like a quart of milk or a gallon of gas, chances are there is a range of prices for products or services similar to yours. And the range might be quite large. So it's very important to figure out exactly where you fit in, the value that you think you're bringing to the marketplace, and what the market will pay for that value. This is a bullseye. This is something that needs to be hit exactly. And that is what the competitive analysis that we spoke about 2 weeks ago is all about. To know exactly who are you exactly competing with.
And not only that, when you do the competitive analysis, what's really important is you see how people are determining their marketplace. You kind of look at the models, look at what they're saying, who they're talking to. That's not a small issue. What is priced for a teenager is very different than what's priced for a 40 to 50-year-old. Now, let's talk about the biggie, margins. Margins really vary, and depending on who you're selling to, if your margin isn't in line, you really have problems. What I'm speaking specifically about now is that typically, if you were selling to a retailer, 60% would be a good retailer margin. By retailer margin, I mean the price that you sell it at $4, and then the price that the retailer prices it at, which hypothetically I'm saying $8.99 to $9.99. Now, I'm hoping that at that point, your cost is $1.50. Because believe me, that difference, it accounts for your profit. If you're selling direct from your website, stand or store, if you're at a farmer's market, if the wholesale is $4, you can do a little less. Retail can be $7.99, but shoot for 50%. And again, if your wholesale is $4, shoot for that $1.50 cost. That's very, very important. Now, a lot of people believe that if they sell online, it's much cheaper than selling to a retailer. There's no freight, there's no warehousing, very, very different. They sell through them, they deliver, end of story. But if you're selling on a website such as Amazon, get all your costs. Those costs can be pretty extensive depending on what you want to do. If you were selling on Amazon and you just want to sell and you ship, that's one price. If you want them to warehouse, that's another price. If you want them to promote, you know how the ads come up when you Google, that costs. And if you end up selling any of the majors like a retailer, there is a little something called EDI. And EDI are reports that you can get from the retailer, and it'll tell you what's selling, rate of sale. It's wonderful information. And again, it's not free. Retailers often charge for placement in the stores, advertising, reports on other issues, and make sure you know the whole ball of wax. Don't be surprised. And if you're selling directly from your website, you know, again, I urge you, if the wholesale is $4, shoot for a $1.50 cost.
Nina,
Yeah.
we might add that the reason you want to have something cost you $1.50 that you sell for $4 and make, in this case, $2.50 per item, is not because you're greedy, okay? This is not about how much you can charge because you want to make as much money as possible.
Oh, no.
The point is, and this is what I think why we have to think of this as strategic. You're going to take some risks in doing this. Things may change. So if you do not have a sufficient margin, you will not be able to deal with contingencies that will inevitably come up. And different businesses have different risks. Some are more stable, some are less stable. And therefore, what determines an appropriate margin is a margin that you need to compensate you for the risks that you're taking, risk that your costs can go up, risk that your price may go down, risk that there may be a snowstorm if your business has to close for a snowstorm, anything else you might think of. Well, you have to be compensated.
And I know, Arnie, there's another point. When you shoot for a margin like this for yourself, you never know what the market is going to do. All of a sudden, your kind of item may not be terribly in demand. You may have to lower your price. Do you have room? And this is why this difference in margin is so important. I had an occasion when my product was wrapped in a cardboard within a plastic. All of a sudden, the price of cardboard went way up. I can't tell you why, but it went way up. Fortunately, I had enough of a margin that I could afford it. So this kind of shoot for this kind of a cost is not a casual thing. Things happen. They always happen.
I would tell a story about a client we had in a service business who was delivering, at least he told us, his service was really as good as it gets, but then he got undersold. That is, someone offered to perform the same service for less money. Mm-hmm. And he was understandably very upset with that, but he could not compete under those circumstances. And if you cannot withstand even the slightest change in the prices you charge, then you are not being compensated for the risks you're taking. That's really what this is about. And that you can cope, This is in many ways a survival strategy. We may say things like you never know what's going to happen, but more or less you kind of sort of know that things can kind of sort of get better or worse. You have to be able to cope with what occurs as long as it's reasonable, okay? That's really what this is about, and it's compensating you for the risks you're taking so that you can deal with change in the price that you charge, change in the prices you pay.
I always assumed that there would be change. Always. We go, yeah, for product list. Boy, this is a biggie. For a product business, never neglect to find out the full terms of sale. Are your goods final sale or are they returnable? This is all the difference in the world. If your goods are returnable, look at the implications of something like that. It's something that before you accept a purchase order, you'd better look at it, and it's always on the purchase order. Please be sure you look at it. Now we're going to go to a sheet that I am a great believer in process and having information at your fingertips. I developed a lot of sheets that I used in my company in order to keep track of the multitude of details. Can we put up the cost sheet? Okay. Now, don't get, looks confusing, but let me review it. Among the sheets that I developed was an individual product sheet that listed everything I needed to know before turning the product over to sales. The top two lines are the product and the product description, which includes the components. By components, if you will notice, I list the suppliers, their cost to me, and I arrive at a total cost of goods. If you look at the top left, let's look at book. The double slim case that I bought for cassettes, 27 cents. A triple slim, 58 cents. Hand assembly into the slipcase was 10 cents. 33 cents for the slipcase. Shrink wrap, 10 cents. So you arrive at after paying for the 5 raw CDs at $2.50 with a $3.88 cost. Now comes the meat and potatoes. All channels of distribution had different margin requirements, different terms of sales, and different retail pricing. The warehouse clubs, like a Costco, worked in years ago on a 12.5% markup. Today it's 15 to 16, but enables them to have a retail price well below most retailers. And please note that on this product, I didn't sell it to Costco or the warehouse clubs because the cost just wasn't there. My margin wouldn't have been there. The mass merchants sold this product at $17.99. Off-price dollar stores sold it at $10.99. Off-price picked up goods at my warehouse, and I usually sold them items I was discontinuing or had overstock. Now, let me go to the key point of this. Look down on the bottom of the sheet where you see notes. And these were notes to my staff because the information I am asking them to gather here is key, and you have to have all the facts at your fingertips. Get the costs from 3 suppliers and their lead times. Very important. Check with Mahoney, who was my printer, and get the lead time on the printing and that he has sufficient card stock? That's also a very important question to ask. Stop with the, check the China sources, rate complete orders, and check if they'll do pallet shipments and where they deliver. Some of the China sources delivered in Newark, some LA, etc. See if you can get an idea of lead times and check previous orders, any new specs. Last time they price stickered, has that changed? A price sticker had to be put on every product. I don't recall a retailer ever doing it. That was my thing to do. And on it would be the style number, the pricing, etc. So once you get all this information, you're then proceeding to sales with knowledge. That's really important. When am I going to release it? When am I going to sell it? And the key point, again, is to have all the facts at your fingertips. So when you go to market, you know what you're talking about. And I can't stress this strongly enough.
When we put this together, we decided that we would show a cost sheet like this, not because we expected most of you guys to be working on this level with this degree of detail, but we thought it was important for you to see how a professional handles this, to set a standard for what you need to know. And that is why we put something like this up there. It is not meant to intimidate. It's simply meant to show you how a professional operates. And that is a standard you should reach for.
I might add, before I had the benefit and got to a point where I had staff, whether I did it on Post-it notes or whatever, I did this kind of checking myself. So it doesn't matter the size of your company, and it doesn't matter if you're a startup or you're really in business, you must know the point of it is know your facts.
I should add that obviously this is about a product business, and service is a little more difficult to get at. I've learned from my colleagues about how to think about a service business in this way. And as I mentioned earlier, you have to think about all the time and money you put into your business versus what you get paid, either an hourly rate or per project or however you get paid. And what you really need to do is work out your hourly rate to see if, once you've taken away all the time for which you do money and you do not get paid and all your costs, is this really doable? Because you can only work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, 52 weeks a year, if that's what you plan to do. So again, you can bring the same level, the same standard for cost in a service business as in a product business.
I guess too, the point of this is never assume. And if there are two words we can leave you with, those are the words. And what we hope you take away from this webinar is that being in business isn't just about creating a great product or a service. First and foremost, you have to have your pricing, costs, and margins clearly in hand. And as we all know, the primary objective in business is to be profitable. And we have had many clients who have come to us who make assumptions, and their assumptions not unrealistic, or not off the walls. They're assumptions that seem on the face to be kind of realistic. But until you kind of test it and look at it, how do you really know if it's realistic? And being realistic is a very important part of being in business. Watching your suppliers, watching your competitors, just never assume.
I would only add to that, that most people who come to us with very good ideas, very good products, never talk about margins and costs. They never talk about numbers. So you could say the primary objective of business is to be profitable. No kidding. What a shock. The point is that you have to master this process in order to be profitable. This is when an idea turns into a business. This is when an existing business can sustain itself.
Also, there are many people that Arnie and I have seen as mentors who have come to us having created a business plan. A business plan is based on assumptions. How do you make those assumptions without doing this kind of work? We preach always that before doing a business plan, do two steps. Do a competitive analysis and really understand what we're talking about today, which is pricing, costs, and margins. Then you're ready to do a business plan. And we want you to succeed, but we want you to succeed the right way with all your facts in your hands. And Arnie and I are SCORE mentors. We're here to help you with your particular issues. Just make an appointment via scorewestchester.org with us, and we'd love to see you. We'd love to help. Now it's your turn. Let's answer your questions.
Okay, I'm going to field the first question. Many of the questions had to do with the availability of these slides, and yes, they are available. I'd like to turn to a service business, and I think it's a really good question, one we've dealt with. The question is, what do you recommend for pricing for a service business? I'm just starting out, but highly qualified, do very well when I speak with people. My price is high for some, but not as high as it can be and should be when I get the word out more. I have dealt with several service providers and have discussions like this. What is absent from the question is any, and here's the way I would look at it, is any sense of economic value, okay? What I mean by that is try and think of this, at least for yourself, even before you get to a client. What is that client paying for? What is that worth, and what are you delivering? Such the client could say to himself, herself, I paid X, I got X plus back. If you don't think of this as an exchange, as a transaction between you and your client, what you offer, what that client pays for, what it's worth, then the whole concept of pricing becomes incredibly opaque. We really don't know what to charge. We've had people who know that competitors in their area charge a lot more, and they'd like to know the magic that enables them to charge more, as if it is magic. So what I think you need to do is, at least in your own mind, be absolutely crystal on the economic value that you are offering. What exactly is it worth? That is, what is your client paying for, and what does he receive? And why is that a benefit to your client such that he's willing to pay your price? And if you think about it in very simple economic terms, at least to start, you might have a better idea about how to put a price on your service. That's the place to start.
I see
Ian, why don't you go ahead? I was going to say, take the question, how do I build a margin into my price? Do you see that one?
I'd like to take one first. There's what does EDI mean?
I thought you did that.
Well, I didn't. Obviously, there's.
Do it again.
Yeah. EDI is electronic data information. And what that is a service that you can subscribe to. And of course, it costs money. But what it gives you is the daily sales of your product from a store. And if, let's say, for example, it was a Toys R Us or somebody like that, you would get information by title, store, and what was selling, rate of sale, very important information. And you subscribed to it, you paid for it, and that was included in your costs. I didn't really do it until I started selling the big box stores because it's expensive. And it isn't something you should entertain unless you're selling that kind of an account.
There are two questions, Nina, I'd like you to address. The
Sure.
first is, how would I build that margin into my price so as adding to the wholesale, or to have my costs low enough so that I have $1.50 extra wiggle room? In other words, how do you build margin into price? And the next question is, how do you account for your fixed cost in figuring out the unit cost of a product?
Okay, let's first go to how you build margin into a price. Okay. Everything, as we've been stressing in this webinar, everything has to be in the costs. That if we're talking about a $4 wholesale, I was using as an example my suggestion of $1.50. Now you have wiggle room if you reach that $1.50. Hopefully you don't have to do a lot of wiggling, but it's a just in case. It's enough of a margin between your costs and your selling price that the unexpected can be accommodated. Imagine if you didn't have that. And that's what we talk about because of having the wiggle room. Very important and a good question. Now this, I'm looking, Arnie, at this one about account for fixed costs, figuring out the unit costs of a product.
Yes.
Okay. There are a lot of things here that you just have to account for and then list everything that you're accounting for. If you're paying rent, you're paying rent. And come up with a figure of kind of what you think your overhead is. If you can't do this yourself, I must tell you, a good place to get an idea of this is see an accountant. But I'm saying make a list and account for all the costs. And many times people who come to see us don't count for all the costs. And things like when you're speaking of advertising, that's the kind of cost I was speaking about in reference to whether you are going on to Instagram, whether you're tying on to all kinds of influencers. It all costs money. Just you have to set a budget. I can spend X a month on this, not just unlimited. So I hope that's an answer. That's a really good question.
I'd like to ask, turn to another question, again, giving people in the service business a bit more attention that we may have not given them. They were talking about hourly rates, and they found an hourly or project rate can be very, very different, say. I had a client who said, this is the best way I think I can look at it, he said, you know, I much rather get paid for project than by an hourly rate. And that was good for that person, but it may not be good for your client. So that's why I think you have to deconstruct, if you're in a service business, I think you really have to deconstruct exactly what it is you're offering, put an economic value on it, and then see where your clients will find the most value, because that's where you get to charge. And so whether it's an hourly rate or a project rate, it really depends on what you're offering, the value of what you're offering, and the benefits to the person paying your price. That's your place to start. At that point, because service businesses vary so much, we really have to talk to each individual business. That's why it's good to start with a very simple transaction. What are you offering? What is your client value? What does your client want? What is your client willing to pay for? And how is it obvious to your client that by paying you what he's paying you, he or she comes out better than when they started? In economic terms, not in feel-good terms, in economic terms. There are also many questions, and I'm going to pass on this one. I think Nina might pass on it too, about what kind of software you can use to deal with costs, etc. I would like to suggest that you contact us at SCORE, because there are people who know this stuff really well. It is not my strength.
Nor mine. And that's a very good suggestion. All right, can I go to one that's here? Is brick and mortar done so web is primary? The truth of the matter is, as we all know, we're living in time. This whole COVID year has been a horror show for everybody. Is brick and mortar done? No, I don't believe it's done at all. People still like to see, feel, touch, and go into a store. Right now, many of us, including myself, we're doing shopping on the web that maybe we didn't do before. And we're just doing it because of the COVID. I'm saying don't ignore brick and mortar, but do it conservatively. And if you were selling, say, a small retailer, try to get a handle on whether they are healthy. And also something else I might add, when I sold individual retailers, and maybe a sale could be $100, $150, I always did it by credit card. The last thing you want to do is have to chase $150 payables. And it's a much healthier thing for you. If you've gone to farmers markets, if you've gone to any of the big craft fairs or any of the big open fairs, everybody is selling this way. And important that you get paid. So for now, you have to make decisions based on what you can and can't do. But no, I don't think brick and mortar is done whatsoever.
Having spent a career in the prediction business, I understand now, first of all, that's really hard. And COVID has turned a lot of people into predictors, into every day. It's an anxiety-provoking time, and we really don't know. And when you're anxious, it's very important to get some kind of closure, someone to tell you, oh, this is coming back. Oh, it's not. Oh, this has changed. And I think you have to be a little careful here in taking any type of COVID prediction at face value. Prediction is extremely hard. Most of the people making those predictions do not get paid to be correct. So therefore, you might want to take what you hear with a certain grain of salt. COVID there may not be the answers you want right now. But when someone makes a prediction for you, what you really want to know is, do they have skin in the game? Have they acted on that prediction? Or are they simply want to score some points for predicting? Be very careful here about drawing post-COVID conclusions about anything. There's another service business question that I'd like to address. In my service business, most costs are fixed. The more clients I have, the less I need to charge. The more I charge, the less clients I think I have, I think. How do I know where to pitch it? Competitors, very different, so not relevant. I think that that's a really good question because it talks to the idiosyncrasy of that particular business. I will start out with a client I once had who I asked the client, I think I may have mentioned this once before, how many clients would you like to have? And they said, as many as I can get. And that sounds like the obvious answer, but it's the wrong answer because you can't handle that many clients. And I do think, though, that certain clients and certain types of payment are optimal. For example, you may want to give a volume discount because what it does is it makes your income more stable, and stable income is worth more than volatile income, even if volatile income can be greater. The question, how do I know where to pitch it? I wouldn't begin to answer that. And anyone who doesn't know more about your business would just be giving you generic. And so to the person who asked that, I I think if we learn more about your business, we could talk about how to refine the pitch. I would say one other thing though, before you even think of pitching it to anyone else, pitch it to yourself in economic terms. You pitch it where it has the most value, and it is value you get to charge for, especially value that is concrete, value that can be seen, not something soft, not that you feel better, okay? A good example of that would be if someone offers you the opportunity to reach a lot of people. Well, that's great, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to reach a lot of prospective clients. Quality is much more important than quantity. These are things that you have to know as it pertains to your particular business.
Let me go back to one that I saw earlier on here. Is there an app for tracking receipt of expenses? And I'm going to tell you that in the beginning years of my business, I had a big envelope on my desk and every receipt went in there. It's not just gas. You make a purchase, you buy a material, anything that I spent, a lunch, it went in there. You decide afterwards with your accountant, but just throw them all in a basket so you don't lose sight of things. And then I'm going to go down to another pricing question I saw. Let me just scroll down. This was, had we talked about factoring advertising in the pricing? Absolutely. Advertising is how you're going to get business. And even if on the internet, if you want to have, as we've all seen, if you Google, you'll see a little thing that says AD, meaning ad, you're paying for that. And whether you're connecting to influences, whatever you're doing on the internet costs. There's no such thing as freebie. And it's very important, but just be realistic about what it is.
Another question regarding a service business. How do you count your own time into the cost of the service? Well, it depends. If you charge $100 an hour to meet with a client, but you prep for an hour, then your hourly rate is really $50 because you're putting in 2 hours and only get paid for $1. If you can get paid for your prep time, if your client will pay for it, that's great. Whether the market will bear that depends. Do you use the minimum amount of money you need to receive and the margins what you would like to receive? I think you got to change your terms here. The minimum amount of money you need to receive is what you, if the minimum amount of money you need to receive you can't receive, then you got to rethink, okay? What your needs and what the market will provide are two different things. Next of all, the margin is not what you would like to receive. The margin is simply the difference between what you pay, the money you pay out, all the money you pay out, and all the money you receive. It's not what you like to receive, it's what you need to receive, because if you don't have a margin, you don't have a profit. So, but you have to think of these things in the proper, it's not what you like and it's not what you need. It's what it's what costs you have and what the market will bear. And these things are variable, and you could work within these numbers, but you have to know these numbers: costs, suppliers, margin.
I'm looking at one question here about what about print on demand pricing, where the cost per item are higher because they're one-offs and not bulk. I'm not quite sure what the question is about, but I'll tell you what I think it is about as to whether you are doing a one-time print. And generally, all costs on printing have to do with quantity and have to do with how you are printing. Now, if you're talking about on-demand pricing, such as going to a Kinko or going to anybody who's got a copy machine, absolutely there's a cost. And if you're going to a printer, that's obviously a different cost. But in the beginning, you may have to do on demand to test something. You don't do big runs of anything when you're testing it. I hope that answers it. And then there's one more here where, just a minute. Oh, if you're in the business idea stage, what process would you suggest to help pick a product to sell based on large margins? That's a really good question. If you're in the business idea stage, the one thing I will really tell you is that family and friends love it, has nothing to do with it. If you're in the business idea stage, come up with one of your ideas and do the competitive analysis. The first thing that you have to find out is A, is there a market for your idea? What kind of prices are there? What kind of products are there? And also, by the way, when you do the competitive analysis, you may pick up ideas. But if you're in the business idea stage, do the competitive analysis. It's very key for you.
There was I was going to say, someone asked, how often do you do it? Competitive analysis, mastering your market, is something you do for the life of your business.
You betcha.
Whether you do it on a daily basis or weekly basis, it really depends. I mean, there's no really answer to that. But the one thing in life you're really not entitled to is surprise, even though you're going to be surprised. It's your responsibility to deal with that. So mastering your marketplace on the assumption that your marketplace is dynamic and subject to change is what you signed up for. There's a question, in a service-based business, what would be the standard industry margin markup versus retail? I think in service, because pricing is a bit more opaque depending on the service, I really don't know what the standard is. I think you'd have to talk to various service providers who may let you in on what their profit margin is. I think it also very much, as always, depends on the service you are providing. I'll give you a simple but an extreme case. If you live in Westchester, you probably need someone to come in and cut a tree down. Normally that'll cost a certain amount of money, but after a storm, the price just skyrockets, okay? Because they can. I bring that up not because that's what your business is like, but because that's an extreme example that reveals supply and demand. Now, depending on the service you provide, how variable is supply and demand? The tree guy is the guy who you really don't care about till you need him, and then you can't pay him enough. It's an extreme example, but you have to you have to think about what you charge in terms of supply and demand, and any obvious change in that depending on what you do. That's why it's so very idiosyncratic and hard to answer.
Well, the other part of that is, this comes back to the competitive analysis again. You have to really be on top of what competitors are charging. And you only do that by periodically doing this kind of a competitive analysis. Prices go up, prices go down, and that's why we stress, please do it, and do it regularly.
Anyway, I think we're coming to the end of our hour. There are more questions, and we would be very happy to answer them if you send them to us via SCORE and address them. I do think in almost every case, though, the question really we need to know more about a particular business, because generic can only go so far. So please feel free, get in touch with us via SCORE, and we'll be very happy to address your business. I hope this works.
We are at Westchester SCORE, and you just go online and look for Westchester SCORE, scorewestchester.org. And Arnie and I would be delighted to help any of you personally. And that gives us a much better idea when we meet with people, and in COVID, when we telephone or Zoom with people, to get a better idea of your particular issues. And we're here to help.
And you don't have to live or work in Westchester.
Okay, and again, I'm Nina Matikow, and I'm working with Arnie Sternheim. And very often we mentor together. And it's proven to be pretty effective with a lot of our clients. So we're happy to see you individually or together.
Okay.
Oh my goodness, there's many more questions here. I wish we could answer them all. And as to even something like somebody is asking here about software programs, that's not my specialty. I don't think it's Arnie's, but if you contact SCORE, there are people there who can help you and make suggestions. And good luck to anybody starting, because I can only tell you from experience that building a business and seeing it work is wonderfully exciting. Peter, are we off?
Just wrapping it up now. Great job. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And really, thank you, Raquel. You've been wonderful.
She just had to step out, but yeah.
Well, tell her for us that she's been most helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, and by the way, your comments were very appreciated last time. Okay. So what'd you think?
Very interesting.
Huh?
Very interesting.